All right, I'm going to call us to order at 5:01 p.m. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to be able to see all of you.
Good to see you too.
So let's call the roll. Trustee Capel.
Here.
Trustee Clark here. Trustee Khan.
Here.
Trustee McMullin.
Here.
All right. Before we proceed, is there anybody who'd like to move or reorder any item on the agenda?
I'd like to ask if you think it makes sense to move the search committee report, which is at 5D2, down to new business 7D, just because the report will result in I hope, in the action that we'll be proposing, and it might make sense to do it all at once.
It's fine with me. Any objection?
5B.
No? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move 5D2 down to 7, right between 7C. Okay. Great. Anything else?
Can I just make a note that,
Please.
Under 5B, the district director's report is gonna be for February 2019, not 2018. That was my mistake, sorry.
So noted. Okay, anything else? All right, then with those adjustments, could I hear a motion that we adopt the agenda?
I'll move that a motion that we adopt the agenda with the changes.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, perfect. So moving on to item 2D, public comment on non-agenda items. If we have anybody who'd like to speak on any item that is not on the agenda, you're welcome to do so at this time if you have a comment card. Otherwise, you're welcome to speak at the time that the discussion topic comes up on the agenda. Okay, wow. I feel like I should make a public comment. All right, okay.
Can you imagine?
Moving on to number 3, the consent calendar. Would anybody like to remove anything from the consent calendar for discussion?
No.
Okay, then I'd like a motion to go ahead and adopt and approve the items on the consent calendar as listed.
So move.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that gets us right to number 5. All right, so all of the items in this section will be informational items, and then there'll be some actions that arise from them later on. So if we could start with 5A, the Library Foundation Support Group.
Nothing particularly critical to say. Bridget Brewster with the Altadena Library Foundation. Our focus continues to be on internal organization as we look to the task of raising funds to support the various needs of the library. We're assessing our database, our file system, and various other things that we need to be looking at internally in order to effectively look at how we might raise funds. While our attention is given to updating policies and bylaws, and that's a time-consuming process, we're also making plans for general appeal for support, and we're also looking at creating a year-end review for public. We're committed to strengthening our outreach while still solidifying effective means of operating. I have met several times with interim director Cindy Clary, and we are forming a very effective and cordial working relationship. We're evaluating how staff resources are allocated to the foundation and what, if any, changes need to be addressed. Her time, her thoughts, and her energy have been extremely helpful and supportive, and we've agreed to meet regularly to sustain a good working relationship. Cynthia Kamanchik and Cynthia Carmona have both agreed to serve as co-chairs of the Taste of Dina. And that will be held in mid-September, but we haven't solidified the date yet. And they'll be reaching out to others in the community who want to serve on the planning committee. The more there are on this committee, the more fun we can have and the more successful this event will be. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Do we have a report from the Friends?
Mark said he wasn't gonna be able to make it tonight, so.
Okay. All right, so just to verify, there's nobody else from the Friends who's gonna make a report. All right. Then we move on to 5B, the District Director's Report. Cindy.
Good afternoon. Just an update on what I've been up to. I've almost completed my one-on-ones with staff. I worked with the Strategic Planning Bylaws and Recruitments Committee, and I attended various meetings, including the Town Council meeting on March 19th. Next month, I'll be focusing on policies and job descriptions. I'll work with staff on the development of a staff evaluation instrument and establish a schedule for regular and ongoing staff evaluations. I'll be working with the Facilities Committee on developing an RFP for architectural services and working with staff on recommendations for our 19-20 budget. Good news on the RFID front, we're about 50% finished with our tagging project, which means that we're hoping to be completed by the end of April. New self-check machines will be available at that time, and we're hoping the benefits will expedite, not hoping, we know the benefits will be expedited check-ins and returns and improved inventory control. At last month's meeting, I was asked to look at, work with BB&K on different pricing structures, and in a preliminary discussion with Ruben Duran, there are 3 options for consideration. However, further analysis by BB&K would have to take place before we actually move forward. So one, we could remain with the status quo, billed by the hour, based on who we're working with, a partner, an associate, or a paralegal. We could possibly go to a blended rate, which would be a single hourly rate, whether the work is done by a partner, an associate, or a paralegal. Or we could have a monthly retainer, which is a flat amount. That would result in predictable bills, but once that retainer was exhausted for the month, we would need to carry work over to the following month. So, as I said, that's going to need further analysis by BB&K, but we are at least in discussion with them. Then a few things coming up that everybody might be interested in. On Saturday, we have our Repair Cafe in partnership with Repair Cafe Pasadena and a shred day. So that will be Saturday, March 30th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So bring all your stuff, and a group of volunteers will try to repair it. But it includes things like jewelry, electrical appliances, clothes, toys, bicycles. I've been told, you name it, you bring it, they'll repair it. So we'll hope that that's the case. And then also you can bring anything that you'd like shredded, and we will shred it for you, or we will have someone shred it for you. Summer reading program is on its way, and the theme this year is the universe of stories, so that's going to be a nice way to get kicked off, which will, the program actually will be for children, teens, and adults, and will launch on June 1st. And finally, a reminder, we're having a staff development day, and the library will be closed all day on Tuesday, April 23rd. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions for Cindy?
I did have one in reading about the RFID conversion. I'm just curious because I think I saw in Christopher's report that self-checkout just won't be available for a little while that conversion is happening. Is that right?
Well, we have self-check right now, just with different machines, and it's through the barcode process. But once the tagging is finished, which we hope will be the end of April, then we'll bring new machines in that will allow reading of the RFID tags. So yeah, no.
So there won't be any. I just wondered if there was going to be a little lull where self-checkout weren't available, and how much of a burden that might be on this.
I'm looking at Stella, but I don't think so. Well, maybe Stella has something to add.
Well, there was also a charge of $800 or so for or they weren't going to, you weren't going to I guess that fee was going to stop because you weren't going to renew that application. Wasn't that something in his report?
I don't remember that.
I remember seeing that.
So I have to look at his report again, I did read it. We might, so yes, we are looking at a date of FE Technologies, which is the company that we use for RFID. They will be coming in-house to help install our new self-check machines, and to also train staff on the equipment. They will be here the end of April, beginning of May. Well, end of April, sorry. But the current checkout machines that we have, there may be a little bit of a period where staff will need to check out materials to patrons, because our contract with the existing machines
That's it.
is ending.
That's
And
the
we,
one.
because of the tight time frame, you know, we weren't gonna extend or do a whole nother year's contract for just a couple of weeks. So Christopher is of the belief that the software will still be usable, so we're thinking that it'll still be usable, but there may be a couple of weeks where, yes, staff might have to do checkouts for patrons, which we're hoping won't be the case, because we're hoping to just kind of have a seamless transition, but that may be the case.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that's the one that I was talking about.
Okay, other questions?
$32
Uh,
for cost to renew it,
So they've decided not to do that.
yeah.
So I just wanted to ask one quick question about the legal billing options. So with those three choices, right, so we can either have our current system where we just get billed for whatever associate or partner or paralegal does, whatever work for whatever time they do it, a blended rate, which would be an average of everybody who does things on a just time-driven basis, or a retainer. I guess in my investigation of our bills, it seems to me that none of those options would present a huge cost savings. Is that your opinion, or did BB&K have any inclination one way or the other?
In discussion with them, they thought that the blended rate might result in some efficiencies on their part, so there would be some savings. I think the monthly retainer, I mean, there is a disadvantage to that, because, you know, we have to stop whatever work we were doing with them if we met it. So long-term, probably not a huge amount of savings, but some.
Yeah. Well, and the downside with a retainer, we would also be billed for work up to a certain point where there might be months that we didn't meet that threshold, so it would be assuming a certain level of, okay. Any other questions? All right, moving on to 5C, financial reports.
So there's nothing particularly noteworthy about the January financials. Our revenues still exceed our expenses thanks to the property tax installment that we received in December. And then printing and rental revenue are still exceeding budget expectations. There was the one expenditure highlight, a legal settlement paid for $111,800 in January. You will notice on this budget versus actual document that the budget figures have been updated with the changes that were discussed at the mid-year budget adjustment.
Perfect, thank you. And I'd just like to add one quick note to the financial report, which is that I don't believe we have an official bill from BB&K yet for February, but an estimate from their office brought us in at around $20,000, which is under what we had projected. We had projected, I believe, 25 each month through the remainder of the year. And I think it's worth noting that the majority of that 20,000 is, again, PRA costs. So that's continuing to be an expensive undertaking for the district. Okay, any questions for Nicole or anything else on this? All right, let's move right along to 5D committee reports. And first up is the bylaws committee. Gwen, would you like to talk a little bit about?
I believe the report is in the packet for,
Yeah.
okay. And so our job was to look at the bylaws, and I believe we're calling them now policies and practices, or policy and procedures of the Altadena Library. Realizing now they had not been revised since 2006. So there was a lot of work to be done, and we worked together. Cindy was a part of that, Kylan, and also Stella. And really, the bulk of the work fell on you to do some revisions. But thank you so very much for doing that, Katie. We met twice to do that, and we submitted this to BB&K on March the 11th to ensure that we didn't omit some things, or there were some things that might have been left off that should have been included. And they returned those to us on March the 20th. So we want to have, our recommendation is that the committee, a full board, have a discussion with the public sometime in April. And I called Cindy today to see what day might have been available, so we haven't set that date yet. But it'll be up on the website as soon as we can, all right? I think that's pretty much it. So if you're really interested in them, I direct you to the website to take a look at them, because it's pretty extensive work that went on, okay? And if you compare them with the old ones, you'll see that it was an extensive amount of work that went into them, starting even in last year and trying to fulfill that and complete that this year. So I think that ends my report, but I would direct everyone who has a concern to please make sure you look at those and critically look at them, so that if you think we omitted something, then we'll be glad to sort of look at that. Thank you.
And if I could just add a quick note to that. So Jason had a really good question, which is there a redlined version of these bylaws? Can you kind of see exactly what's changed? And the answer is unfortunately no, because 98% of them have changed. So the old bylaws from 2006 are still up on the website, as are the draft of the new policies. And you'll see, just sort of in terms of volume, there's a real difference between them. So I would encourage you to take a look through. We combined sort of 3 different sources. We had our original bylaws from 2006. We had the Palos Verdes, which is an independent special library district, Palos Verdes policy manual, which was sort of our template, and then a combination of the draft that the prior incarnation of this committee had come up with, as well as, you know, stuff from the Ed Code, stuff from government code, and we kind of smashed all of that together into this new set of policies. So it's a lot of information, and then there was a full legal review of that. Everything got checked out, all of our sites were double checked, and you know, we should be on the right side of things. But if you have questions about why something is the way it is, there's almost certainly a reason behind it, and so we thought getting into that at a special meeting might be easier.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
So do I understand correctly, you combined the bylaws into the policies and created? I'm
Yeah.
only asking
It's a-
because
it's
the
a-
foundation is in that process.
So it's a semantic thing, right? So government agencies, public agencies don't have bylaws, nonprofits do. So yeah, whatever, right? Fine. So it's definitely a semantic distinction, but in our attempt to try to be compliant with, you know, all the rules that we're supposed to follow, technically these are board policies in the same way that as a public agency we have employment policies and reimbursement policies and technology policies. So that's the sort of change, but functionally they are serving the same purpose.
I just wanted to point out one thing, and obviously there's gonna be more than enough time to discuss this at whenever we schedule this meeting. But the one thing I noticed real quick is, when those of us that were sworn in the December meeting, I know there was a big question about the timing, right, of the swearing in and some different things. I haven't gotten through all this yet, but the one section I've seen so far as far as being sworn in it just says the next meeting. It still seems somewhat vague, so I don't know if we wanna just revisit that with our legal counsel to make sure that we have enough details in there that in the future there's aren't any questions as far as the timing and all that. Or is that deeper in here?
I think
It's
what you're referring to is in reference to an appointment when there's been a resignation, is that,
No.
no?
the swearing in.
It's after the election.
Yes, after the election.
So if you look at 2.8, I think that might be is that what you're referring to, Susan? This is why we're gonna have a special meeting.
Yeah.
But no, but
No, it's,
yeah.
I was specifically looking at 2.1, where it just simply says, shall be recorded in the minutes of the next.
Oh,
board
that's
meeting.
the votes, yeah, we do that, so.
That comes from the county, the official tabulation of votes. So they have a report that shows all the numbers with each candidate. Yeah, we do put that
Okay.
in the minutes, or in the board package after the election.
But were you also,
Yeah, so 2.8 talks about it as well.
yeah,
Okay, just.
Yeah, so
it sounds
No,
like
I agree,
it's
and this is one of the things where sort of making this a little bit more specific and legalistic is both the plus and the minus. So like 2.6 talks about when you take office, 2.8 talks about when you're sworn in, so those are two separate things, which is how the election code sets it out. So most of the stuff in the election part is drawn directly from the law, so there's not a whole, I mean, we can decide to kind of do more than they're saying, but most of the language on that about like noon on the first Friday in December following the election, November and odd year, all that sort of stuff comes directly from the code.
Okay.
But thank you, yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of
Detail.
that we'll wanna talk about. Okay. So, having moved 5D2 down to new business, that brings us to 5D3, the Strategic Planning Committee, which I'd like to talk about briefly for an update. So, the Strategic Planning Committee has been constituted, and we had our first 2 meetings. So, unfortunately, because of scheduling issues, we weren't able to have one meeting where the entire committee could meet together, so we did 2 versions of exactly the same meeting, one on a Saturday and one on a Monday, both at the Bob Lucas Branch. And the goal with those meetings was to sort of brief everybody on the Brown Act and make sure everybody knew how that works, because as a legislative body, we have to be operating consistently with the Brown Act, and then to talk about what the process is for the strategic plan. And so I'd like to just briefly talk about that here, because I think it's pretty important. So the idea is that the Strategic Planning Committee, along with the board, will be working in conjunction with a facilitator or a consultant that the library district will hire to come in and lead that process. And that's something that was voted on at the last meeting, and is the case for 2 reasons. One, to help us have sort of a third-party independent perspective on the district and make sure that what we're doing isn't influenced by any past assumptions or any even current assumptions that we might be making about how the district should operate. And secondly, to make sure that we're doing this in as professional, inclusive, and participatory a way as we can. And so there has been an RFP that Cindy, myself, and the entire Strategic Planning Committee has seen and gone over. That's included in the board packet this month, and that was posted and went live, I believe, on Thursday of this past week. So that's out right now, and we have until April 17th to get proposals back in from firms and organizations that would like to facilitate that process for us. And then, much like we're gonna do today, we'll have an opportunity to make some recommendations to the board based on what we get back. Independently of that process unfolding with a consultant, the Strategic Planning Committee is doing some preliminary big picture thinking, some sort of visioning and imagining about what the district might look like, what we might want from a library district, what we feel like has gone really well, where we feel like there might be gaps. And so we started to have that conversation at those 2 meetings. Everybody has been asked to go away and talk to people in their networks and ask them those same kind of questions, like, are you using the library? Are you using the branch? Are you using the main? Are you using services online? If not, why? What do you like? What do you not like? What speaks to you? What do you enjoy? And so we can start to get a very rough straw poll for some of the initial reactions that people have. The other thing that we're spending some time doing is thinking about our mission statement and core values, right? What are the values that are important to this library district? What's gonna drive our decision making? What are the principles that we're gonna look to when we have difficult situations or, you know, competing interests? What are those core things that we'll turn back to and reflect on? And does the mission statement of the district as it's currently written reflect what we wanna do, everything that we think we should do? So a lot of big picture stuff, but I think some really important big idea conversations to help us move forward. If you go through the RFP, you'll see that there's a timeline in there that basically sets out what we would like for a facilitator to do. So we're hoping that the proposals that come back are reflective of that. But basically it is a process that involves the board, that involves the entire strategic planning committee, but that also involves the community, that has at least 2 town halls as part of it. One early in the process to ask these kind of big picture questions, and one towards the end of the process to say, okay, well, here's, you know, a draft of the plan. What do you think? What are we missing? What do we need? So that we have something that all the way along has quite a bit of buy-in and that people feel like they really have a say in. So that's where we are, and hopefully by our next meeting we'll have some proposals from facilitators to update. The only action that needs to happen is we did have one person who wanted to serve on the committee who unfortunately wasn't able to get her materials in by our prior deadline. They came in like 2 days afterwards, so I'm just gonna ask when we get to that section that we vote to add her to the committee formally. She did attend as a member of the public at the initial meetings. Any questions on any of that?
Bravo.
Okay.
That's the main one.
All right, then moving on to 5E, trustee reports. Does anybody have anything they'd like to talk about? Okay.
I've got one little thing since we're just blowing through this agenda.
We're about to set a record.
Sorry. No, I just wanted to tell a tiny, tiny little story about the effect of one book from this library that I checked out years ago, before I ever knew I was going to live in Altadena, and before I certainly ever knew I was going to be sitting in this chair. Many of you know I'm a working school librarian in South Pasadena, and I rode my bike up here from South Pasadena one summer day to just look around, and I found this amazing book called Read It Forward, and it's a book about a reading promotion program you can do in a school. And it's kind of like if you've heard of the One City, One School, or One City, One Story kind of project, where you get everybody to read the same book. And because of this book, I've done this program in my school now. And the reason I'm bringing it up now is because I just did it last week. This year's project happened last Thursday. 5 years in a row now, we've bought 100 copies of a book, passed them around my school, asked people to read it, and then read it forward to someone else, so as many people who wanted to could read it. And then it all culminates, we'd have all kinds of projects and art projects and events in the library over the course of the year, and the culmination is the visit from the author. So this year's title is When Friendship Followed Me Home by Paul Griffin, who lives in New York. And he spent the whole day at my school last week. He did assembly, so 1,100 kids heard him speak. I don't know how many kids read the book, but I know a lot of them did. He met with a special ed English class who had all read the book, and they all had piercing questions for him. He was interviewed by our local, our in-house news TV show. We have a broadcast journalism class. He autographed books in the library because kids had a chance to buy their own copy, and he also taught a reading workshop to self-selected kids who were interested in writing. So, 5 years later, this book has affected, 6,000 or 7,000 kids all told. And it's one of my campus's favorite events that happens all year. So, multiply this by thousands and thousands, and I'm a librarian, so I live in this world, but I think sometimes we don't always perceive the ripples that go out of a building like this, just in terms of simple things like incredible books that our staff find for us. So I appreciate everything you guys do to support, not just Altadena, the wider community as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah, that is really cool. Okay, Gwen, anything?
No, not
Okay.
at this time, but I was very thrilled to see the Altadena Library at the PUSD's Focus on Women. I'm not sure the name of the program right now, but we had people that actually were there from Altadena Library and had a table. Katie was there and I was there, and we had a great time.
Yeah.
There were several people from the Altadena Library. And it's wonderful when we move out of this building and become a part of this wider community. Thank you so much for that.
I'm gonna tag on to what Gwen was saying. It was really cool. So
Oh, it's
at
great.
Elliott, this is the second year in a row that they've done it. They have a women's history essay contest that's open to middle schoolers all across PUSD.
Right.
And it asks on a specific theme for participants to either write an essay or to create an art project. And so they had a reading of the essays, but they also had
And
like an
the art.
installation, and so all the art was there. It was really amazing. Judy Chu was there, representatives from all other sorts
It
of
was
local
great.
groups were there. But the best part was we got to hear all the kids read their essays, and there were some
Oh,
there were some great essays.
Great essays.
It was amazing. Yeah, I thought, and of course, we had a library table there. We also,
And Stella was there.
and Stella was there, totally Stella was there. Also sort of other community events where the libraries had a presence recently. At the Altadena Town Council, I'm gonna forget the census tract, 4612. Anyway, Veronica Jones census tract, there was a town hall meeting this past Saturday, and the library was there, and it was a very cool thing because not only did we have all of our flyers and our Connect newsletter, and I gave a spiel about what's happening, but we also had free books. So it was like the place to be. People were going by and they're like, are they really free? And I'm like, are you sure? And it was just a really cool, engaging thing that I thought, like we had a tiny little free library right in the middle of an event.
That's one way to clean up that basement.
One book at a time.
We're gonna have to go to a lot of events.
It all counts.
That's right.
It does.
On my part, just a couple of other things. I was able to attend the second installment of NBBA's ongoing meeting series about local journalism, and if you guys haven't had a chance to kind of follow along with this process, it's a really fascinating conversation that's happening about what local journalism for Altadena would look like, whether that's a newspaper in print or online or some sort of local news. And I think they've had 2 meetings on the topic now, and they're probably gonna have at least 2 or 3 more, but it's a conversation that's really, really interesting. They have a lot of people who are experts that have come and spoken about their experiences in journalism and thinking about ways in which the library might be a part of that in some form or fashion, and ways in which we already are as a disseminator of information and certainly a community center. And then I was also very fortunate to get to MC the second Saturday concert this past month, which was really fun. We had live jazz, and we had a jazz youth ensemble that was here playing, and they were just outstanding. I also was able to make it to Elisa Callow's book talk. She's a local author who's written on sort of the opportunities for really interesting local food right here in East LA. And I think that about does it. So, yeah, we are moving kind of fast. All right.
It's a little scary.
I mean, if anybody would like to yell at us, we are always available for that. We could take a break. But let's move on to item 6. So, as you guys know, we have an ongoing process whereby we cover certain aspects of the Brown Act. And so as a cost-saving measure, but also as a way to increase some of our in-house expertise, Kylan has been working with BB&K to put together tonight's presentation, which I believe is on closed session rules, correct?
Yeah, so don't get too excited, I'm about to slow way down. No, I'll try to fly through this. So I did get this PowerPoint from BB&K and kind of read through it, just to make sure I generally understand. I had a conversation with Ruben as well quickly today, just to, again, make sure I understand kind of what I'm talking about. But I am not going to read every slide. As you'll see, some of them are very dense, and that's just not my style. So hopefully you guys can read through. Katie has offered to take some notes, so trustees that have any questions, there's a slide at the end that says questions. Since they're not here, Katie has offered to take the notes for you guys to record those questions and then get back with Cindy or Ruben so that we can get those answered for you guys. Okay, so the topic is closed sessions under the Brown Act. And this is just kind of a list of the topics that the slides will go through. So basically this is saying that there are very specific items for which you can have a closed session. And so the Brown Act does have a list, and you have to have one of those provisions in order to have a closed session. Ready? Okay. So this is basically just saying that the exceptions are very specific. They're not interpreted broadly. So as you'll see as we go on and it lays out the exceptions, this is just saying that it's very specific. So again, this is the one that I told Ruben I read 3 times, and I just wanted to make sure I understood. So that's what it's saying. So some of the common exceptions, real property, not super common for us here, but eventually could be. If you're gonna negotiate a sale or transfer or something, then that is an exception for closed session. So, again, it's very specific for what can be discussed. So pending litigation, so you guys know about this one pretty well. If you need to meet with legal counsel regarding pending litigation, then that it can be a closed session exception. So definition of litigation. And then the law does define some of those words like pending, and then it lists those. And then as you'll see, like number 3, based on existing facts and circumstances, again, it will define that. So, this is where you get into those very specific details. So, like number one, if, you know, if you guys have information, and you think, you know, you may be sued, that's their facts unknown item. Number two, same thing, like if there's an accident, you know, someone falls and they haven't threatened to sue you yet, but you guys think that that's a possibility, you could go into closed session and talk to your legal counsel and say, you know, hey, this happened. And, there are some, you do have to disclose some details in those cases. Ruben told me, like with accidents and things like that, but that's just, the basic. So settlement discussions. So this is just saying you can't, you know, you can't use pending litigation as a sidestep. It actually has to be a real threat. So, yeah, you can't go in to a closed session to have, you know, a mediation basically. Right?
I guess I do have a question. So you can't go into closed session to have mediation. So if you're gonna have mediation, that has to happen in an open meeting?
That would probably be a separate process,
Mhm.
like with the court, or,
Mhm.
you know. But this is saying that you can't, like if someone's threatening to sue you, you can't go into closed session to meet with that person and their legal counsel, basically. You can only go into closed session to meet with your legal counsel. So personnel matters. So,
Sorry, can you go back for one
Yeah.
second? So in that last sentence where it says,
It's
all this
one
stuff,
sentence.
blah, 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 brought against the employee by another person or employee unless the employee requests a public session. Is that only, like, unless the employee requests a public session, is that applicable only to the, to hear complaints or charges bit?
I think so.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that
and
doesn't
then
mean
the
like,
notice required line is you would have to give them notice
right,
that there was going to be this, complaint charges. And I didn't clarify this with Ruben, you could clarify this with him, but my understanding is that those are very formal, like
Right.
complaints and charges. But you might wanna clarify that, yeah. So, if there's an examination of a witness, it defines employee, that part was super confusing to me as well, cause it says independent contractor who functions as an officer employee, but not any elected official member of legislative body or other independent contractors. So, he said, like, legal counsel, because it's the board's legal counsel, it's technically part of, like, that would fall under that. He also said, like, if, for example, the county was gonna have a commission, he used literacy, like a commission on literacy, and you were going to send one of the trustees, that you guys would still fall under that last, like, you know, member of the legislative body or elected official. So this, basically for this board, you have the authority over the district director. So that would be the personnel exception that you could use for the district director, so like the evaluation, the hiring, dismissal.
Does that mean that personnel matters about anybody but the board, the library director cannot be discussed in closed session?
That's, I asked Ruben, I said, you know, doesn't the board technically have authority over everyone? He said, that it would be the director, like you guys would have authority over the director, and that's it. But you can clarify, he did say there's some differences in, the codes when it pertains to like school districts versus special districts. So he said in our case, it is just the director that you would go into closed session under that, exception. But I'm guessing if there was something else, you know, like pending litigation or something that pertained to someone else. But for the personnel, like evaluation, dismissal, all of that, it would just be the director.
High-ranking department heads.
So, yeah, independent contractors for projects have to be appointed in open session. So, this is talking about, represented and unrepresented employees. So, basically, how he explained it was if we had a union, you would meet with your representative only to instruct them on how to go back to, you know, the union's rep, basically. You wouldn't meet in a closed session and meet with them, you would just meet with your representative.
What about unrepresented employees?
He said that was a little different, that might be a good question for him. He wasn't getting into it too far, yeah. And again, that goes back to our structure and how, you know, the director has authority over the staff. So again, more about the labor negotiations. So yeah, this is where it gets a little confusing and maybe good to clarify with him if you have questions. So we've all seen this. This is just saying that on your agenda you have to explain why you're going into closed session. That second part there is just saying that the law does basically give you the language and the format. It's very specific and it tells you what to put on your agenda. And then if you have, like litigation, for example, you have to include the case number, those specific details. So announcing what you're going to go into closed session for, and then once you're in closed session, only discussing what you announced. So you can't, you know, let some of the public in and leave the rest out. That's what this is saying. And it's saying that you can have the board and your attorney or director or, you know, relevant people without an official role should not be present. So if you have a conflict of interest, then obviously you can't be in on that discussion. Like if you were the seller, for example, in a property negotiation to the district or something along those lines. Or if you yourself were suing the district, you wouldn't go into that pending litigation closed session. all the same. And then confidentiality, so anything you discuss in closed session is confidential. Unless, the board authorizes disclosure of that information. And then enforcement, so you can ask the court to get involved, disciplinary action, or referral to the grand jury. So this is just saying, the exceptions to that, the disclosure. If someone thinks that, you know, you're breaking the law or not doing things right. Or if they disclose something from closed session that was not confidential, basically. Which is a little confusing, because why would you be in closed session if it wasn't confidential, but, you know. So yeah, this is just saying after you come out of closed session, if you do take a vote, then that should be reported. Either orally or in writing, must provide requesters copy of all of that stuff, so, if someone knows that you guys are gonna go into closed session and anticipates that there will be, like a finalized signed contract or settlement agreement, they can request it ahead of time, which was new to me, so, I asked Ruben about that, cause it's saying, you know, at the end of closed session, you have to give them a copy, and then everyone else gets it the next business day, but he said that that's pretty rare, because often, you know, how often do you go in closed session, you come out with, you know, your final agreement. So, must reconvene back into open session, make the disclosures and adjourn the meeting. And yeah, we're done.
Cleaned out the room.
Yeah, wow. Fair enough. Okay, so Bridget, you missed some key closed session requirements. We're gonna start again. We'll start again. All right, so I know I have a couple of questions. Are there other questions people have that we should forward on to BB&K, things you'd like clarification on?
No.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, that brings us on to our new business. So unless there are any objections, I propose that we move right into it, because I think we'll be able to kind of go through here. So item 7A is resolution 2019-02, establishing authorized signatures. And this is just to allow Cindy to be a signer on our accounts. So, resolution is on page 81 of your packet. Nope, 82. Yep.
So, sorry, I don't know if this matters. Sorry, Nicole. So I had added Katie as the second signatory on this. I guess I didn't put the right version in the board package. The other thing is, I don't know if you guys want to change who's signing since Terry's out of town, or it can wait, I mean.
We, just to clarify that Katie, we did take Katie, what's her last name?
Oh, you're thinking of,
Christina.
Christine, oh, okay, that wasn't what you were talking
no,
about.
I'm talking about Katie Clark
Sorry.
signing as secretary underneath Terry on the resolution. but I don't have the copy here because Terry wasn't gonna be here. And so I thought, you know, we've had it approved in the past and then signed later, but I didn't know how soon you guys need, if you guys need the resolution, then we should just make a note that, you know, someone else will be signing. And, like, you can sign for Terry and then someone, like Betsy or Glenn or someone can sign.
Right.
Can I just ask about the third set of authorized signers, where my name is? I'm happy to be a signer if you need me to be a signer, but is that supposed to be the two officers? Because I'm not an officer anymore.
Right.
And then the bylaws does have a thing of
The
the
secretary.
official signatories of official documents is the president and the secretary.
The
I don't know if
board
that
bylaws?
includes
Yeah.
checks or not.
Well,
It
it's
seems
so,
pretty official to me.
yeah, so technically, I mean, we haven't adopted the new policies yet, but basically the way the old ones are written and the intent is that you would have a signatory and a countersigner, so it'd be like the president, the secretary, who would sign those things that are like basically implementing board action. So a resolution would be a good example of that. Whereas operational stuff, you wouldn't wanna have to have two trustees sign a check every time the department, or you know, every time the district needed to pay a vendor or something like that. So for like official board business or something implementing board policy, then you need the two officers. For everything else, an operational person should be totally fine.
Well, up to Betsy and up to you guys, if you matters.
Yeah, our financial policies don't stipulate that it has to be officers, it's
Okay.
just 2 board members.
Okay. Then let's not hold it up. We don't
Yeah,
have to.
I would say we can always adjust it after we do the new bylaws or policies, so it's consistent, but in the meantime. Okay, any other questions or comments on this resolution? All right, then if I could just get a motion to adopt resolution 2019-02, establishing authorized signatures as it appears in your packet, please.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is adopted, and we will figure out the signatures.
Who was the second? on that?
Oh, Gwen.
Gwen, okay. Thank you.
All right, moving on to 7B, California Form 700, Statement of Economic Interest. Kylan, I believe you had something on this?
So this is just a reminder, that the annual conflict of interest forms are due. I was just double checking the date. So they are due, April 2nd. And I think back in February, the county sent out emails if you're required, to file an annual statement. They sent out an email with a login, to log in online if you wanna file electronically. Otherwise, you can file your physical form with me. So our 2 new trustees don't have to fill out an annual because you just did yours, assuming in December. And Betsy and Terry do because it's been one continuous, service. And then Gwen as well, will have an annual, statement due. And then our internal positions like director and all those internal positions we have as well. But yeah, it's just a reminder.
Okay,
April 2nd, huh?
April 2nd. All right, that brings us to item 7C, District Art Collection Conservation. And Cindy, I believe you have some information for us before we jump into taking action.
Yeah, there's a lot of information in your packet, so I'll make this brief, but it was kind of a fun exploration on my part of all the art that's available in the library. You have some significant pieces. And the reason this is before us is because of the February meeting, Renee Amy, a member of the community, brought to the board's attention the need for restoration of the George Gardner Simmons piece that's now housed in the main library in the bookstore area. The artwork is entitled Millard Canyon at Granite Gate, and it's a beautiful painting, approximately 4 by 6. And a plaque on the frame indicates that it was donated to the library by Mr. and Mrs. Guy Fisher from Ojai, California. We weren't able to uncover the history of that donation, so if anybody knows that, see me after the meeting, I'd love to know. An initial appraisal was completed in 2002, and it was appraised at $95,000. The current auction price for Simmons varied quite a bit, from $11,000 to $130,000. And he's a plein air artist, so most of his work is very small. It's unusual to have something this large in his catalog. A fundraising appeal was actually done in January of 17, which is what I think Mr. Amy was addressing way back in February, but apparently nothing came of that one. In addition to the Simmons Library, you have two works by Nishan Tour. I think that's how you pronounce his name, I'm sorry if it's not. One is The Owl, which is now in the children's room, and the other one is Lady, which resides in the reading court. And Lady, it's stone cast material, and Lady actually was restored, I think, in preparation for the renovation and the reopening. David Green is the artist who created the Tree of Life, which is installed at the main library doorway. That actually, interestingly enough, I didn't realize, wasn't the water feature in its original state. And then Owl Tree, which is at the secondary entrance. Both of those are welded brass. Obviously, the water system no longer works. So in 2016, a gentleman did an estimate of what it would take to appraise it at least, and it was at $5,300. We also have a preliminary, from Mr. Amy about appraising and conserving the Simmons work at $5,000, but we couldn't track down an official estimate for that. So I just need direction as to how you would like me to proceed. We can either just focus on the George Gardner Simmons piece and determine its value and the cost of restoration, and perhaps the thing I'm most concerned about, I think, with that piece, if it is valuable, whether this is really the right location for it, because, you have to, with artwork of value, you need to think about lighting and humidity, and I don't know if we have the facility to really do it in the proper way. Then we can also, if you choose, also look at the other works, the Nishan Tour and the David Green. I did find some auction prices on both those artists. Nishan Tour's work, there wasn't a heck of a lot that had sold at auction recently, but most of his works are under $1,000. And David Green, there was something that I think sold in 2017 at $2,500. Also a welded sculpture piece. So there are attachments, including the appraisal that was done in 2002. The Altadena Historical Society has had a lot of interest in the Simmons piece, so I gave you an article related to the piece itself. There was a preliminary assessment, as I said, of Tree of Life done in 2016, and then an appeal, a fundraising appeal that I've included in the package from 2017. And also a little history in Connect about the Lady sculpture when it was restored. So all very interesting.
So I guess the first question, it'd be surprising if we do, but do we have any standing line items in the budget that we could legitimately argue this could come out of this?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so.
It would be something.
I didn't think we had an extensive enough collection to have such a line item, but.
And, all the costs and the values we have are a bit dated, so I would suspect that it would cost more just with the Gardner piece than has been stated in the past. It would be something that if we took it out of the library budget, we have to budget it for next year. And it also does create fundraising opportunities, and, I think the foundation actually discussed it at their last meeting, and there may be people in the community that are willing to at least appraise it on the Simmons piece at no cost or minimal cost, but I didn't get to the point of exploring all those different options.
And I believe that was the case with Lady. I believe that some family donated the cost of restoring that. So maybe it is that you might be able to get some families to pay the cost of that.
And I would also say that, based on the description of the Simmons piece when they last looked at it in 2002, that it really has, it has declined in its, I'm trying to say, it is declined, it needs more restoration than it did in 2002.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused as to what kind of action we can even take at this point. Are we looking at whether to fund an appraisal in order to know whether or not to ask for fundraising on a?
This is very, very
Just
preliminary,
preliminary.
and really, it's just you giving me direction to find out more in terms of costs. And if you want me to pursue just the Simmons work, or all the works, or none of the works, but it's really meant to gauge your interest in moving forward with anything.
I would like to, I think just based on what Renee shared and what you shared, we're looking at between the three pieces, it sounds like a best case scenario, $10,000, right?
Best case.
Best case, most likely more. So, it's hard to make a decision on how to move forward. I would like to hear more about the fundraising opportunities, especially if there's a way to turn it into more of an event, to go beyond just simply restoring.
Yeah. Well, and I think today our question is, do we want to ask Cindy to sort of take the next step, which would be to call around, find some appraisers, and get somebody in to actually appraise the art and take a look at what the restoration costs would be, because right now I don't think we have a current understanding of that. So I think that we would need to do that regardless, whether we wanted to restore them, whether we wanted to just straight out of the budget, whether we wanted to try to raise money to do that, whether we said, forget it, we don't care about art, we're gonna sell it all. Whatever choice we make, we would have to have a current appraisal anyway. So I think that, taking the next step to find a good appraiser, I think if we're gonna have somebody come and look at the Simmons piece, it would make sense to have somebody come and look at all of our pieces, just so that we have a current appraisal on all of our in-house artwork that has some value to it, or some market value.
Yeah, I do think it's important to know the value of the Simmons piece, and I do think you need to put it in the context of all of his work and really consider whether it should be here, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It is a remarkable piece to have here, and obviously it's indicative of the surrounding area. But once again, how do you maintain it in a way that keeps its integrity?
Right.
So that would be a question once we get an appraisal for you to chew on. The other thing is the timing. If you decide to go forward with this, and thinking about what my priorities are, I would suggest that we put it off until maybe June or July in terms of, I can get somebody to come in and appraise it, but that's gonna be at a cost. And so whatever cost that is would have to be deferred to the 19-20 budget. So maybe wait a little bit. The main thing is that we wanted to bring it forward. A member of the community has stated a concern, and I think we share that concern. It's just timing.
Yeah. No, I think that's reasonable. Well, maybe then one way to handle it would be to ask you to go ahead and look into bringing in some appraisers with the deadline of, late May, early June. Because there's plenty of other stuff on your plate as well, given that we wouldn't be able to swing that cost until our next fiscal year anyway.
And I'm hearing do the Simmons and the two metal sculptures outside
Oh, that would be good.
in terms of what we want to appraise and consider.
What do you guys think?
I think so.
Yeah.
I can't think of a good reason not to. It's gonna cost a little more to appraise all of them, but if we care about the art in the building, we should care about all of it.
And I think for the painting too, it'll be critical to understand what steps need to be taken to preserve it going forward. Like, does it need to be put behind glass, all this kind of.
brings us to item 7, now D, which is going to be the report from the Executive Search Committee, as well as recommended action on the selection of Executive Search Consultant.
Okay. There is a written report as well as a summary of the 5 proposals that we received. Our deadline, let me back up. At last meeting, the board authorized the committee to issue an RFP to find an executive search firm to help us find a new director. It was an extremely tight time frame, but we did get an RFP distributed on March 8th to 13 firms, and it was as posted on the library website as well. The deadline, once we realized that a little bit of extra time that we needed to bake in order to have proper legal review of the RFP, that moved our whole process back a bit, so that's why our deadline wasn't until last Friday. So we received a total of 5 proposals. Cindy and I spent Saturday afternoon combing through them. And she prepared a matrix, which is also on the website and on a copy on the back table, that compares the 5 proposals that we received. The committee recommends at this point that we consider the top 2 on this matrix as our finalists, Bob Murray and Associates out of Roseville, California, and William Avery and Associates from Los Gatos. The 3 other firms that submitted proposals are GovHR USA. It's a firm out of Illinois. It's an exclusively public sector recruiting firm, but we could discern fairly little experience recruiting for library directors, and their price didn't make them competitive with the firms that did have that experience. Coffin Associates out of Berkeley is primarily an HR consulting firm, kind of like the one we use, and so their submission of an RFP into our process was, in their own words, part of an attempt to expand their business into recruiting, and so their experience was not as robust as the top 2 firms that we have identified. And then the third RFP was the third of the ones that we are suggesting we don't consider, is an individual named Susan Hildreth. She used to be the president of the American Library Association, and among other very high-level positions nationally. She is not connected to any kind of a search firm, as far as we could tell. She hadn't really done an independent search on behalf of a library. She's of course done searches in her own role as a leader in libraries that she's worked in, but her experience did not compare quite as favorably to the 2 that we're suggesting that we move forward with. So Cindy and I identified some questions that we want to get clarified with them. We had asked in our RFP for them to do a salary survey for us, which wasn't really addressed sufficiently. We need some more details on exactly how many visits, in-person visits to us they are proposing. A big one that Cindy did get some feedback on today was the idea of getting feedback from the community, and I'm just going to insert here an explanation of something in that regard that happened this past month. There was a survey that was produced. Terry produced it for the purpose of collecting feedback from staff and from board members of our support groups. And we did get some feedback from those surveys, but that was really intended to be an internal document for our own staff and for the boards of our support groups. And it I don't know if any of you who are a member of the Friends of the Library got a copy of the survey by email, which wasn't the original intent, this certainly was not, I mean, that's fine, we will love to get feedback any way we can, but that certainly was not intended as the sum total of what we're gonna be asking for from the community as far as input that we need to move forward to make a decision about a director. So the ways that the search committee was intending for that information to be collected was with the help of whatever search firm we end up selecting, as well as in coordination with the strategic planning committee. So we do have some more detail from the two firms that Cindy was able to find out today by phone, which are, I might as well go ahead and fill you in on this. So William Avery and Associates told Cindy over the phone today that they have 3 different types of methods of collecting community input, and we could choose any one of these 3 and it would be included in the fees that they cited in their proposal. And if we wanted to add either one or both of the other 2, there would be a cost that could be added to the fees that they quoted. So the ideas that they are proposing are a town hall meeting open to the general public, an online survey that would be posted on the website throughout the process, and that they would help analyze. And third would be the possibility of a telephone survey of key stakeholders that the district identifies for the search firm. So again, any one of those could be included in the proposal that they have already submitted. The addition of 1 or 2 of the other ideas could be added for an additional fee. As far as Bob Murray and Associates, Cindy was able to determine that they did not include community outreach in their original quote. They do say that that's an optional additional service that they could add. They do quote in their proposal that optional additional service would cost $1,500 plus expenses, but she wasn't able to reach someone today to find out exactly what that would include or what it would comprise. So we do have some questions remaining to clarify with both of these firms about that particular aspect of their proposed services. A couple of other details about whether or not they would be using subcontractors, some details about their insurance coverage, etc. Those things were not quite spelled out thoroughly enough in their proposals. So based on the results of finding out those details and the process of conducting reference checks, they did provide references of other agencies that they've done searches for. What we would like to ask is if the board is willing to authorize us to make a selection between these 2 finalists based on the answers that we find to that question, the remaining questions, and then authorize us to move ahead to enter into a contract for executive services, up to a cost of $30,000. I'm citing a figure slightly higher than either of them proposed in order to have the option in case we decided to add any of these additional services. And I'm asking for that authorization at this meeting just so that we don't need to wait another whole month before we actually hire a search firm, so that we can move forward. Both of these 2 finalists propose a process that could be up to 4 months, and by the way, I was incorrect in my printed report. If you're reading that, I had cited 2 to 3 months. It's really more like a 4-month process, so we don't want to delay that at all if we can help it. So that's the gist of my report, I guess, and any questions I can answer, I'd be happy to.
I had a couple of questions. So the first is just on the cost of service for the top 2 contenders. I totally agree with your assessment. They seem like definitely the most qualified. So for Murray and Associates, it says 17,500, and then is that 7,500 for reimbursables part of that 17? That's an additional material.
No, it seems that the customary way for billing in these arrangements is a fee for the actual services of the search, and then the associated expenses that go along with that, travel, printing, et cetera, are charged separately.
But if we added presumably whatever their $1,500 search, they would be virtually identical, right? Because Avery is slightly higher, but already wraps that in.
Yeah, I guess I would feel like, if we are really narrowing it down to these two, which I think is the right move, I'm not sure that cost really is the issue.
That was what I was trying to get at. It seems
decide on.
like they're
Yeah,
pretty
they're
much
pretty
the
much
same.
washed.
Okay, so my next question is about their performance guarantee.
Yes.
So, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So Murray and Associates says, we'll keep at it for 12 months, but if it takes us longer than we're projecting, then you keep paying our expenses?
No.
Or-
What that means is once they have, and correct me if I'm not getting it right, but I'm pretty sure, what that means is once they have helped us find a candidate and hired them, if they don't last more than 12 months, they will do another search without charging us another fee, but they would charge us any more expenses.
Whatever their cost of goods is for like brochures and stuff. Okay.
That doesn't mean that they guarantee to get us a person in 12 months. That means that
Right.
once we hire someone,
That
they
makes
guarantee that
sense.
they'll last at least 12 months.
Okay, and so Avery doesn't have that kind of thing. They just say we're gonna keep going until we find somebody, but if they quit or you fire them during the first year, we'll similarly replace them? Or, I'm just trying to get at the difference, I guess, between their two.
Well, that's a good point, and maybe it's worth adding to our question, Cindy. To really clarify, what happens if at the end of the search that they're proposing to do, we don't find someone?
Right.
Do they stick with us to start over? And it sounds like Avery is saying some version of that might be possible, but we don't necessarily see that that's the case.
I mean, there was one that said if we offer you candidates and you don't like any of the candidates, then we'll do another recruitment, and I can't remember which one it was, but that's, kind of,
Yeah, is that Kaufman Associates, should
that might have been called.
decision makers disapprove of final candidates and or they don't interview right, they'll find another person? Yeah, it would be good to know what their contingency plan is and how that lays out, if there is a different, and it looks like it's a pretty standard, if they're saying the same thing, it looks like it might be kind of a standard thing, but it'd be good to know what that looks like.
Yeah, I think getting a more detailed answer to that question for Murray would be a really good idea. Because that's, I hope it's not probable, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
They listed, Murray listed no subcontractors, so you're going to ask that question?
Yes, that's
You're going to make
exactly-
sure that happens, as well as the insurance?
Correct.
Okay.
By the way, Murray, I mentioned in my report that Palos Verdes did a search for a director not that long ago, and the three search firms that their board ended up deciding among were Murray, Avery, and a third one who did not respond to our RFP. And Murray was the one they ended up using.
And I hear they got a pretty good candidate too.
Well,
Yes, they did.
they got, you're probably thinking about Ryan, but that's not what happened. So they did a search for a director. They ended up promoting their assistant director, even with a whole external search. They promoted their internal assistant director to be director, and Ryan was hired to replace as the assistant director. So I guess you could say indirectly he became.
So has the committee already contacted the references, or is that still?
No, that's what we're at, just because we only reviewed the RFPs like day before yesterday. So, what we're asking for is the time to do that, as well as get these questions answered, and then to just allow us to make the decision between these two in order to move forward.
Yeah, 'cause it looks like Avery clearly has a greater amount of experience, but they also have an active search.
Mm.
I think we can compete with Monterey.
Any other questions or discussion on this? All right, then, I am going to request a motion that we empower the chair and the interim director to proceed with any additional, investigation of these top two contenders that needs to be undertaken, and then enter into a contract with whichever one they feel best fits our needs.
Awesome. Can I move that?
Sure.
Yeah, so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hearing none opposed, motion carries. All right.
Avery's done a lot with libraries.
All right, and then our last item of business is just a real quick and easy one. So this is now 7F, approval of additional strategic planning committee members. So as I mentioned during my report, I would just request that the board confirm Jill Barnes Hawkins as an additional member of the strategic planning committee. But before we jump into that, does anybody have any questions or discussion on that? Her materials, or she wrote a letter about her sort of background and community interests that's in your packet on page something.
Sorry.
Nope, totally.
I had it a few minutes ago.
On page 73. So originally a high school English teacher, 30-plus year career in banking. She doesn't mention it explicitly in her details of her board, her nonprofit board experience, but she does have strategic planning experience on a number of nonprofit boards, including Armory Center and others.
She sounds like an interesting person. I just move that you include Jill Barnes in the committee, the strategic planning committee.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to include Jill Barnes Hawkins as a member of the strategic planning committee. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Hearing none opposed, motion carries. All right, so as far as I'm aware, we don't have any items of correspondence this month to discuss, which takes us to item 9, proposed future agenda items. So is there anything that anybody would like to bring up for our agenda in April? No? Okay. I have 2 quick things I'd like to include. One is something that came out of some discussions that we had with Kylan, with members of staff, as well as with our representative from California Special District Association, which is the question of the California Voting Rights Act. So basically, I don't want to get into too much detail because we're going to find out more about all this and do some learning between now and next month. But basically the deal is that under the CVRA, there is a move to convert any districts that elect representatives in an at-large fashion to districts. Like, so we would have to divide our library district up into seats. So like, you know, East Altadena would be one, Central Altadena would be another, and West Altadena, who knows, right? But the idea is that at-large elections are kind of inherently discriminatory and tend to disadvantage protected classes and create like ongoing problematic racial disparities in districts and lead to unequal representation. So that's the premise behind it. what that has resulted in is there are a couple of law firms throughout the state of California that are just going special district by special district and serving them with letters saying you're in violation of the Voting Rights Act and you have to fix it. So the reason I want to put this on the agenda, it's extortion, and you can, they basically shake you down, because once that letter gets served to you, whether or not any of those inequities exist in your district, a 90-day clock starts ticking, and you have to undertake a whole lot of very specific and quite difficult actions to meet the terms of the law. So I think that we should be a little proactive on this and look into it. There's a white paper from CSDA that we just received, I think, today. I know Cindy and I are both going to look into this some more. We're going to talk to BB&K about it. But I'd like to bring that up next month and at least have a first conversation so that we can kind of start to feel out what makes the most sense going forward. And hopefully we will make our own decision independently of all this and it won't get served, but it has been happening. They're going through the Inland Empire and like Imperial County right now, so I just don't want us to be in a situation where we get a letter.
I think Kern County was the most recent one to
Yeah.
move away from it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a statewide thing, so, yeah, so CVRA for April. And then, I'm not sure what form this agenda item would take, but just, I think it would be good to have a discussion among, now that we're kind of moving on all fronts with the executive search committee, facilities is doing some stuff with their RFP, we've got some things happening with strategic planning, just to make sure that we coordinate all of our efforts so that we're not paying multiple people to do similar things. Do you know what I mean? I think it would be smart to just make sure that whatever our public outreach looks like, for example, that those bases get covered in smart ways and we're not replicating action among various consultants, or we can figure out how to farm it out to the correct one so that we're doing the amount of outreach we want to do in the way that we want to do it, in the time frame it needs to be done, but that we're not duplicating those efforts, because I worry that if there are 8 surveys floating around town, we're going to get like diminished participation in all of them. So that's a very vague request. All right, anything else? All right, then we just have one more item, which is, I'd like to take a couple of moments to recognize Felipe Avila, who was a longtime employee of the Altadena Library District, and who sadly passed away on March 16th, 2019. But I'd like to take a couple of minutes to talk about who he was and his contributions to the district, and then ask for a moment of silence in his memory. Felipe was hired in 1989 as a custodian and became building service and repairman in 1990. In 2002, he was the head of the facilities department as building maintenance supervisor and retired in 2019 after 30 years of service to the district. He was well-known, well-liked by many, and is survived by his wife, his children, and grandchildren. And so at this time, I'd ask that we observe a moment of silence in honor of Felipe Avila. Thank you. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our agenda. At this time, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. It is 6:35 p.m.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.